Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the meeting. The meeting is about to start. Laptops away, phones down. I just need to start the WebEx. Tom, why is the WebEx not working? What? Come on. You had one job to get the WebEx going. Oh, every time. Come on. Come on. Oh, it's gone. Right, great. Okay, we can crack on. Welcome to the monthly sales all hands for this fine organization of Crunch. My name is Andy Cotgreave. I'm the VP of Sales for the organization. And as always, I've got the best slides and the best charts to get you the data you need to know. Oh, now, was that somebody on WebEx? Tom, can you stop eating breakfast? Put yourself on mute. Yep, thank you. Very good. Don't need to hear that mouth crunching going on. Let's get going. We've got an agenda going today. We've got sales update. It's nearly 2020, so we've got a sales target update. Then I'm going to show you some training about the new dashboard application. Because I love using Tableau, I'm going to give you a new tip. And then after that, about 5 minutes, some guy's going to do a presentation about how to present data. But I know everything, so let's get on with this meeting. Here we go. Sales update. Well done, sales team. You've done a really good job. Here's the sales dashboard. And, oh yeah, sorry, it looked bigger on my laptop, but you can see the data anyway, right? As you can see in the 3 categories of sales, really good job from the home office team. As you can see, month-on-month sales are up. For the home office team, you have smashed it. But technology team, what on earth happened? As you can see, as we can all see in this room, bad month-on-month performance and really bad progress year on year. So your team, we're going to have to do some retraining for you. So that's the sales update. Let's move on to the 2020 sales targets. As you know, at Crunch, we operate in many regions across Europe. So I've been doing the analysis with the board. Here's the results of the analysis for next year. And, oh yeah, sorry, it looked bigger on my laptop, but you can see the data anyway, right? As you can see, whichever region you are in, whether you're big or small, as you can see, your percent growth target next year is really high. So take a look at this data, note down the results, and go smash it next year based on this data that you can see on the screen. Sounds good? I hope so. Right, next thing, dashboard training. Here's the latest iteration of our dashboard. Looking good, some changes were made. You may have heard that we had to let the training team go. I'm afraid they were underperforming, but that's fine. I can train you in how to use a dashboard myself. So I want to show 3 changes we've made. First of all, this KPI has now changed. Not this KPI, but this one is indicating something new. So make sure you use that KPI to base your reports on. Secondly, we changed this filter based on your feedback. So this filter, not this one, but this one, is going to be the one that you will be able to use correctly to find the information for your sales reports. And finally, based on your feedback, this chart is now, as you can see, this chart is now the one that's working. Brilliant. All right. Who needs a training team when you've got me showing you how to use your dashboard? And finally, a quick Tableau tip. You know I love using Tableau and showing you how to use this thing, so I'm going to show you how to build a slope chart in Tableau. What I've done is break down the categories into 8 different categories. Look at the inside. You can see loads of things. Great. But in a slope chart, what you want to do is just get rid of the data that's not at the start and end of the data source, get rid of it, and then bish, bash, bosh, that's a slope chart. You now all know how to make a slope chart, and this is how to make the axis relative, not absolute. All right? Everybody can now build a slope chart. That's as easy as, that's all you need to know. Fantastic. Right, well, that's the end of the meeting. So I'd like to thank you all very much for attending. Everybody's invited to the all-hands party tonight with karaoke. I'll be leading with some Taylor Swift. And with that, thank you very much. All right. He was awful. Who here has made those mistakes in meetings? Come on, who has seen those mistakes being made? Yes. And did anybody think they were just in every single meeting ever? Yes. All right. So that whole sketch was inspired by a good friend of mine, Cole Knaflick, who wrote The Amazing Storytelling with Data. I highly recommend that book. But this is clear and presentation danger. How to present charts on a big screen. My name is Andy Cotgreave. I've been with Tableau for 8 years. I fell in love with Tableau about 12 years ago. 3 years ago, I wrote the big book of dashboards. So if dashboarding and data applications are your thing, that might be a good thing to go by. I do also do magic, so later on, once I've had a beer, if you want to see some magic, we can see what we can do. But that's not the goal for this 45-minute session. My motivation is that over my 20-plus year career, I have sat in thousands of meetings where intelligent, passionate people with good information present things like this on the screen. And what I've come to realize, and when I talk to people who are also sitting there, is that person is there talking about this interesting information. But if you, the audience, are not seeing something that supports the message, psychologically, we kind of turn off. And this particular chart is based on one I sat through month after month after month in marketing meetings, and they literally did say, as you can see, month-on-month growth is up or down. And we were all sitting there going, nope, can't see. And I think that's really disappointing because every one of us in this room at this conference is some sort of analyst. And again, my motivation for this talk is also echoed by this brilliant tweet from Alberto Cairo, who has an astonishingly good book coming out. It was launched in the US just a couple of days ago, How Charts Lie. It's the best book on data communication I've read in years. Really, really good. But in this tweet, he said, if you're an analyst who thinks or uses the cliche soft skill to talk about the powers of presentation and communication, then you don't understand what that job is. What our job as an analyst to do is to communicate information. And if you don't think that's important, you are missing one of the key tenets of data analysis and data science. Vendors like Tableau, vendors like the companies you are building, our competitors, they all have these incredible stacks. Data collection, data cleaning, data analysis, exploration. Brilliant. But if you cannot get the last mile correct, then what's the point? If you can't take the data and then actually bring it to a meeting or bring it to sell it to customers or try and change your career with your conversation with your manager, then you're failing. All that effort is possibly for nothing. So with that, I want to give you some really simple ideas so that right from the moment you leave this room, you can start building better charts or presenting your data on slides or on screens in a better way. So hopefully that sounds good. I need to clear up two key concepts first. A big screen, right? What is this? What is a big screen? Well, the challenge is we often think we're going to present in a room like this if we do presentations. And that is physically a big screen, 80 inches, maybe 73 inches. But for the person at the back of the room, that is not actually a big screen. Sometimes you're in a room like this, and this actually is a pretty big screen. The visibility right at the back is good, but even in some keynotes, they can look pretty small from the back. But whether you do presentations or not, every one of you in this room will at some point plug a laptop into a screen in a meeting room at your office, and that still might be a big screen, but for the person at the back of the room, it actually isn't. So we have to escape the mentality that just because the screen is physically large when you're right next to it, it's not actually big for the people at the back of the room or even the people halfway from the front. So we have to think differently anytime we're putting data on a screen. As you saw in Bad Andy's terrible meeting, he showed three types of data. The first kind of data we put on a big screen is when we're showing off our applications. This is a dashboard, or it could be an intricate data application that you have in your organization. If that's the case, you need to be able to show it correctly so people can follow the information. This is actually a real chart that somebody used to talk about sales targets, and they did literally say, as you can see, whatever region you're in, % growth is big next year. I could not, right? But you are going to be using data to persuade, to sell information, to try and get people to change minds, right? Data visualization, data is not truth. When you make a chart, you are conveying an opinion or an argument to drive change, particularly when you're standing in front of a screen in a meeting. So we're going to talk about how to best do that with charts. And then finally, we might get time to talk about how to show an application as well. Bad Andy was making every single mistake in demoing Tableau there, and literally none of you know how to build a slope chart, even though he showed you the process. So whether you're doing training or demos or ad hoc data exploration, how can you do that better? And again, many of you here have got incredible applications, you're really talented startups. When you're selling that to end users, you've got to bring them along on the journey as well. Otherwise, they're left going, well, I didn't really follow what I saw, so maybe I won't buy that software. Does that sound good? Should we fix some charts? Yes, right. I love it. I love Friday morning enthusiasm. I'm going to assume that was a yes from everybody. Right, first of all, data applications and dashboards. So, rules of thumb. That dashboard has about 96 pieces of information on it. These applications are designed for small screens, laptops or cell phones, right? They're not designed to be shown on a screen like this. You lot have no idea what you're seeing. There is a massive cognitive process for you to try and understand something that I know intimately. So if I'm going to show something like this to you or to customers or to colleagues, I've got to make sure you know what I'm talking about when I talk about it. And the biggest thing that drives me crazy when I watch presentations is this. As you can see, that chart is fixed, that's the filter to use, and that's the thing we changed because of your feedback. I'm the only person in this 700-seat room that knows what I'm pointing at. And we do it all the time, right? You've got to consciously think of a way of breaking out of that problem, because if I want to point to something on the screen, I need to know everybody in the room knows what I'm pointing at. So, how to point. You did not know today you were going to learn how to point. But I'm going to teach you 3 ways. First of all, you can zoom, right? You can do this on a Mac or a desktop and go, right, let me just zoom into this KPI. The red dot indicates that it's underperforming. We changed that. That's, you can contrast that with this KPI, no red dot, everything is working fine. And then zoom back out, right? This is a really good way to bring attention to the part of the dashboard you're speaking to as you speak about it. Practice using it, because it can make quite a nauseating experience if you don't know how to do it fluidly. So zooming is good. You can also physically point, right? You know, I do have a finger, and I can go and touch the screen sometimes. But you end up with problems, some problems. You can say, here's the KPI that's underperforming, and these dots represent the 3 categories that lead to the underperformance. Great. But there's a danger in physically pointing. First of all, if you intend to physically point, and then you end up in a room like this, it's like, well, I literally can't, right? I can't physically point. Or maybe the screen's over there. And then the other risk is, if you don't have a microphone or you don't have a big projecting voice, you turn here and you start talking to the screen and nobody can hear you, right? Nobody likes watching somebody's back and listening to mumbles because the sound is getting swallowed by the wall. So physically pointing is difficult. Is anybody a fan of laser pointers? No. I really hate laser pointers. Again, they don't often show up on screens. It's this tiny, disappointing little point. And if you end up in a meeting or a presentation room where there's 2 screens, you're going to disappoint one set of people at least. Because if I laser point over there, this lot can't see it, right? And if I choose that laser point, choose to point over there, they can't see it. So that's a problem. You can solve this problem with hardware. Because what if you could stand here and use this incredible thing, which they're using throughout Crunch, and go, all right, this is the KPI that's underperforming. This is performing fine. These red dots indicate something's going wrong, and this is the filter we changed. And let's just zoom in so you can see the actual values, right? I get no commission for this, but this is the best piece of hardware I've ever bought. It's a Logitech Spotlight, and if you do a lot of presenting, if you go and sell your software to customers, then this is a really cool way of bringing attention to something as you need to say it. Finally, if you're doing something in PowerPoint, you can do shapes and callouts, right? This is the KPI that's on target. These are the categories that are failing. This is the chart that we changed, and this is the filter we changed as well. I actually really like this approach, because what I appreciate is that we are all short of time, and often we don't rehearse a presentation maybe as much as we might want to. And what shapes and callouts do is they kind of create the flow of your talk. So as you see each shape on the screen, your brain goes, oh yeah, now I've got to talk about that. Then the second one appears, I've got to talk about that, and so on. So that is how to point. If you're going to show something complicated on the screen, your audience have no idea what they're supposed to look at as you're talking about it. It's down to you to make sure your complex things shine on the screen. Now, before we go into the second one, I'm going to show you a masterclass in that from Hans Rosling. Does anybody not know who Hans Rosling was? A few people have not heard of Hans Rosling. He was a Swedish statistician and doctor who was world-changing in the way he brought data to life. He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. He left us an amazing book called Factfulness. I highly recommend you read that. But he was also a master storyteller. He keynoted at our Tableau conference back in 2013, and he knew how to point, right? He turned up with this 10-foot-long stick with a big arrow on the front of it. That's not the practical kind of thing I can travel around Europe with, but he knew what to do. But what I want you to do now is show 2 minutes of his very famous TED Talk. Some of you have probably seen it. I've seen it hundreds of times. But as you watch this 2-minute video, just think, how does he explain this chart? And also how he points. And then we'll talk about chart explanation following the video. So here we go.
So this is what I could display here. I put fertility rate here, number of children per woman, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 8 children per woman. We have very good data since 1962, 1960 about, on the size of families in all countries. The error margin is narrow. Here I put life expectancy at birth, from 30 years in some countries up to about 70 years. And 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still 2 types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see. We start the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see there? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there. But now Bangladesh, it's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
I have no idea how many times I've watched that. It must be hundreds and hundreds, and it still blows me away, right? He was a master at storytelling. He brought inspiration from circus performance, from sports commentating, and many others, and acting as well, to create a dramatic performance with data. Now, who here thinks they could be like Hans Rosling? Yeah, not many people do, but you all can, right? I give you the power. The next time you go and show data, even if it's about something kind of mundane, such as lead generation in your marketing organization, if you lean in and bring that data to life, it completely changes the way a meeting feels. I've seen my colleagues in marketing now go on to do this with mundane charts, and it's transformational, right? So we can all be a bit like Hans Rosling when we're trying to inform people about data or persuade people to change. That video also highlights another question. How complex should a chart be for a presentation? Well, I think the answer to this is complex. Is this too complicated a chart for a presentation? Who thinks it is? Right, a bunch of people do, right? This is actually the same data you just saw Hans Rosling present and bring to life in that TED Talk. There's 180 marks on that scatter plot, each one representing a country. And the thing he did was recognize that a complex chart needs to be understood in about half the time it's on the screen for, right? So you don't need to worry about how complex a chart should be, but if you've got some incredible analysis that you want to present, and you want to show the complexity in the meeting, you have to give that chart the time to breathe and bring it to life, because even though you might intimately know what every pixel does, everybody in the room has no idea. So you have to bring them along with you. Let me show you another example. This is Charles Bernard's 1879 chart showing Napoleon's march to Moscow in 1812. Hands up who's not seen this before. Right, quite a lot of people have not seen this. Right, so I will explain what's going on. So in 1879, Charles Bernard made this chart to tell a story about what happened in 1812 when Napoleon tried to defeat the Russians and went to Moscow. Here, right, it's 20, I'm going to time how long this takes. So, let's go to Spotlight. So in 1812, Napoleon wanted to go and defeat the Russians. So he assembled an army of 500,000 soldiers on the Russian border, and he started marching them towards Moscow. The color represents the advance to Moscow, and the thickness of the line represents how many soldiers are still alive or able-bodied as he progressed. So you can see that by the time he got to Moscow, he'd already lost an awful lot of soldiers, pretty disastrous already. The Russians were adopting a scorched earth policy and essentially burning the villages, burning the fields, and starving Napoleon's soldiers. They also decided that when he got to Moscow, the Russians decided to evacuate the city, right? So there was no Russian army to fight. So Napoleon had to sit there for a few weeks and then eventually begin a retreat because there was nobody to fight. He couldn't secure a victory if he didn't win a battle. So then he started retreating, and that's the black line. We start coming back, and by now it's winter, right? Winter in Russia, it's not a very nice place to be. Down here, you've got the temperature during the retreat of Napoleon's army, and you might not be able to see the numbers, but it's really cold. And what we can see now is that the line is getting very, very, very thin. This is turning into a disaster. Some reinforcements join here, and then at this river crossing, the Prezi River, about half the remaining soldiers perished as they tried to cross the frozen river. They'd had to burn all their boats and carts to stay warm, but now, so they tried to get across the river, and it was awful. And then they finally limped back to the Russian border with only about 10 to 20,000 soldiers left, depending on what sources you look at. So this is one of the biggest military disasters of all time, right? Complete horrible loss of life. And it took me about 2 minutes to tell you that story. Now, put yourselves in the shoes of Field Marshal McHale Kutuzov. He was the Russian admiral, the leader of the Russian army at the time, Field Marshal. And imagine a conversation with Emperor Alexander, who was in charge of Russia. I believe it might have gone something like this on their ancient Android text phone interface. So, there you go. So, Alexander says, "You smashed Napoleon, great job on scorched earth." Kutuzov's feeling good. He says, "Right, great, should we have some vodkas later?" And then the boss says, "Yeah, but do you want to do a summary PowerPoint to the team before we go?" And he's like, "Oh, here we go." So he asks, "Well, how long am I going to have in the meeting?" And Alexander comes back saying, 2 minutes, it's a busy agenda. Right? Does that sound familiar? We've all been there. And you can bet this was at the end of the meeting and that some boss with some big ego has overrun their segment and talked about themselves for 20 minutes. So that was probably condensed to about 30 seconds. So, Kutuzov wants to tell the story of what happened. Right? Imagine he's got all the data and has done this incredible analysis, and he's really proud of this chart. This is not the chart he needs to show. He needs to get rid of his ego and think, how do I convey the message in the time I have in the meeting? And it could be like this. "Hi, everybody. Hi, Alexander. Thanks, everybody, for having me at the meeting. I only have a moment. I just want to summarize the campaign success. Scorched earth policy was really good. We managed to kill or capture 98% of Napoleon's soldiers. That's all I have time for. Please make an appointment through the Kremlin if you want more information. Thanks. That's the end of the meeting. Let's go and have some vodka." Right? Oh. Thank you very much. I do realize, I mean, this is a tragedy of almost unimaginable magnitude. And the Russians actually lost almost the same amount of soldiers and civilians themselves. So, awful thing. But the point being, this is the situation where you might have a wonderful complex chart which shows some brilliant analysis. It might be the result of all your A/B testing or the analysis of the competition management or how your CRM is working, whatever it is. But you've got to be mindful of how long have you got in that meeting to communicate what the chart shows to your audience. And if it's only 2 minutes, then the complex chart is not the right one. But if you have 5 minutes, then use the complex chart. You have to make that decision consciously. Once you've made that decision, you think, okay, well, how can I actually design charts to show what I want to communicate? You know, we've got to punch home a message when we're trying to persuade and inform people about what the data means. And for this, we can have a whole book on font size, color, chart choice, white space, annotations. I'm just going to do two things. I'm going to talk about color first. And for this, we have a pop quiz where you're all going to have to raise your hands. I'm going to show a chart which shows customers by day of week, something that is probably close to all our hearts. But the thing is, I'm going to divide the audience in half. Whoa, bless you. Wow. That was amazing. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for longer than the duration of a sneeze. Now, I kind of wanted to do it here, but you're a bit more than, it's not quite a 50-50 split. So I'm going to create an arbitrary line, which is about here. Okay, so if you're on this side, and you guys just have to decide, you're team A, you're team B. Okay, team A. Right. So half of you have to close your eyes. So team A, you close your eyes. Just relax, meditate, contemplate life for a moment. Team B, you're with me. Right, you're going to see the chart. And here it is, customers by day of week. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's gone. Right, okay. Team A, you all close your eyes. Team B, or this team, Team A, come back. Hello, everybody. We're still here. Right, now you're going to see a chart. Customers by day of week. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, it's gone. All right, everybody back. Hello. I trust nobody fell asleep. Unless somebody was anybody out till 3 a.m. last night? There were some people out till 3 a.m. Well done. Good work. All right. First group, somebody shout out a conclusion you made from that chart. Tuesday. Any others? Weekends were lower? Right. I'm going to stick with weekends were lower. Put your hand up if you concluded that weekends were lower on this side. Right, now keep your hands up. Keep your hands high, high, high. Right, just keep them high. On this team, put your hands up if you concluded that weekends were lower. Right, brilliant. I love it when it works. Look at this. This team, I think, is small. Keep them up. Keep them up high. This team is bigger. They all made a conclusion that not many people did here. Let's see why. You guys saw color. Used to highlight. You guys just saw a rainbow for decorative purposes. What was the point of that? Color is this rich gift given to us by evolution, right? We evolved to see changes of color in our landscapes around us to survive. Little did evolution know that that would help us be better communicators of data. I can use color to do anything. Customers by day of the week. Tuesday is the biggest day, which many of you over here also saw. Or just arbitrarily compare Sunday and Thursday. Right? Color can be used to really emphasize the message you want to make. So don't just put a chart on the screen. Think, which bit of this chart, which data needs to stand out and bring it to the forefront using color. Secondly, we can talk about annotations. And this is an example we did one of our Tableau conferences a couple of years ago. We work with an organization called PATH, who are working to eradicate malaria across Africa, specifically in Zambia. And we wanted to highlight the fact that their work, partly aided by Tableau, had led to a massive progress towards the eradication of malaria. How would we show the data? So this was the data. It's not actually the data, but it was pretty much this shape. Well, how do you communicate something in a keynote that's going to punch home the message? You can make the chart look pretty. But again, I'm thinking, how can I make the cognitive message, the message get to you as quickly as I can using all sorts of things? Well, this is what the slide actually looked like. We just put a massive, great big annotation on it saying 93% reduction in cases. You can do this. Don't just... I feel that sometimes as data scientists and data analysts, we are encumbered with the fact of going, well, we have complex data, therefore to justify our jobs and our roles, we have to show complex charts to communicate that this has been an intricate piece of analysis and we've done a lot of work on it. But I actually think you're doing yourself a disservice there, because what you're doing is showing something that people can't understand. So show the key message and then always be able to provide the context in a subsequent conversation or through email or something else. Be prepared to justify this 93% and explain why. So with time, we could do a whole day's workshop on this, but we don't have all that time. I'll show another case study, one of the charts that Bad Andy showed in the meeting. So when this chart was shown back in a Tableau meeting, it was this time last year actually, the presenter said, this is the results of the analysis. As you can see, every region, whatever the market size, has a great percentage growth, or has a big percentage growth. So that was the message, big percentage growth. Can anybody see that in this chart? Good, nobody, right? I got hold of this slide and then I put a stopwatch on. It took me 90 seconds to decipher this chart to actually verify that it did show what was being said. Yes, I am that nerdy. But this was a problem because the data's there, the analysis was good, but I was just like, I don't believe you because I can't see it in the data. So what kind of thing would we change to make this work? First of all, fill the slide. I'll come back to that. Now, we can't really have a conversation here, but think, what are the kind of formatting mistakes or slide or chart mistakes that are being made here? There's a bunch, right? So what I'll do is I'll open this chart in Tableau and show you how you can change it. All right, we are live. Right. Now, I'm not demonstrating Tableau. This isn't meant to show you what Tableau is capable of. I'm just showing you how to change, how you can go from a terrible chart to what is probably an effective chart. So here it is. First thing I'm going to do is reduce clutter, right? I want you to get to the message as quick as I possibly can. So I'm going to get rid of the axes and some of the headers. You don't need the axes because the bars are labeled. I'm also going to get rid of borders and shading. Let's get rid of that. And the shading. No, not the shading, sorry, the grid lines. Because I just want you to see text and a mark and a label. Now, what's the big problem with this chart now? Small font, right. Put your hand up if you can read that. Right, okay. Okay, put your hand up if you can't read that, because in fact, you're my data point. Right, look at this. This is a default font setting for one of the leading BI tools in the world. Amazing. And as I'm on my desktop, I'm like, yeah, Sweden and Denmark and Finland and France, woohoo! You lot can't see this. I see this every time I go to conferences. I have seen this many times in the last 24 hours, right? Here's the data, and we're all going, is it? I have no idea. I can't see it. So it looks good for me, but I need to make it look good for you. So let's make the font a little bit bigger. Format, font, worksheet. Right, so 9 point, this is a good default size for here. 12 points. Who's still struggling to read it? Loads of you. I mean, even down at the front, right? This is amazing. 16. Who's struggling to read it? Yep, we've still got people who can't read my amazing piece of data analysis. Anybody still? Anybody still struggling? I think I see one hand, so let's just go up a little bit more. Right? Everyone can now read it. This looks ridiculous on my laptop screen now. I'm like, why would you ever present that? But this chart is not for me on this laptop. It's for you at the back of the room. So make sure the fonts can be read by everybody in the room. Finally, 77.23%. Literally none of you care about 0.23. So we'll just change the formatting to make it a little easier. Percent. All right. There you go. Hopefully, we're on the step to improvement. Final thing I'll do is show the... Ooh. What happened there? Well, that was interesting. Let's format the title. Make that bigger. Can you all read that? Probably, but I'll make it a little bit bigger anyway. Let's go 36. Right. I can guarantee there's somebody looking at their mobile phone right now. Yeah, I can see one person looking at their mobile phone, right? There is nobody in this world that can create a presentation or a conversation that is so compelling that 100% of the room will not at some point look at the mobile phone, right? So if you're going to show data, put a title explaining what that data shows, right? The title there actually says the message that I'm going to say in words. And that's really important because if people drift off, if they get an alert on their phone, when they come back, at least if they've missed me say the words on the screen give them that hook back into the presentation. So that's one solution of doing it. Put your hands up if you are thinking, well, that's all well and good, Andy, but percentage of what? Yeah, right? I've just shown a percentage. How big is sales? And believe me, I have contemplated many ways for doing this. In the end, I've come up with something like this. As the presenter, my message was about percentage growth. Therefore, the chart, the thing I want to be easier for you to conclude is the bar, right? I'm using the bar to show percentage growth because that's the message I'm communicating. Now, if you're in the sales organization, that might not be the most important thing to you, but it's my chart. I get to choose what I put in the primary attentive attribute. But since we then want to know, well, which are the biggest markets, then using a circle, which is a less accurate a pre-attentive attribute, at least you can see that the UK is the biggest market of this lot, right? I've also used color in the title to encode what the chart is showing. So now I don't even need to show a color legend because the title gives you the color legend itself, right? So this may be, well, let's go back here. Oh, hang on, let's just jump through these. We sorted it, we rotated it. We did a bigger font. Oh, I didn't rotate it, actually. Removed the headers, simplified the numbers, removed the lines. All right, so we ended up with something like this, and then I know some people will say, but where's sales? I don't profess to say that this one on the right is the best solution, but I hope you think it's a better solution, right? And it only takes 10 or so clicks, 5 or 6 processes to think, how can I take this good analysis and make it something that everybody you want to communicate to can actually see the information itself? This is always really interesting, you know, in a smaller workshop style, people generate all sorts of arguments here. So I'll be taking questions at the end of this. If you have disagreements or agreements or things you would do, then do use Slido and we can have a conversation in a few minutes. But the takeaway points here is if you are going to use data to persuade your colleagues to make a decision, or to sell your software or product to customers, or to communicate something to your CEO, can everybody in the room read the chart? You've got to think about the person at the back of the room, not you when you're looking at your laptop screen. Are you using color to highlight things and annotations and titles? And is the chart going to be on the screen or are your audience going to see the chart for long enough so that they can actually understand it? If you get that right, then you will start becoming like Hans Rosling, and you will all be better data communicators. Right, well, I'll just talk quickly about demoing. Right, we do a lot of demos of Tableau in big cinemas, and sometimes we're on like enormous IMAX screens. And if you're throwing the mouse around everywhere trying to sell a piece of software, it's very, very nauseating. So don't move the mouse too much. Yeah, and use Zoom. Just think, be mindful of the audience. Right, so that's how to demo. I kind of skipped through that one because I want to get to the general tips at the end. So we've looked at how to show complex data applications. We've looked at some ways you can make your persuasive or informative charts a little bit more informative and persuasive. And I very briefly talked about how to show pieces of software. If you go to my blog at gravyanecdote.com, there is a lot more content on these topics, so if you want some more information, do go there. But I'll leave you with 3 general tips. And these tips really are an acknowledgement that some of the things I've shown you take time, and we are all busy, right? We all have a lot on our plate. So it might be hard sometimes to actually enact all these things. Well, okay, I accept that. So tip 1, if you're going to paste a complex piece of insight onto a slide, make it fill the screen, right? It still isn't a very good chart, but at least 10% more of you can read the text than before, right? So just forget the white space. Make the data, make the piece of information fill the screen. Secondly, I think the thing that triggered me to make this presentation was the mistake on this slide, which drives me crazy. Can anybody spot something that would just make somebody who's a bit pernickety go mad. What are you saying? The volumes are falling down. Yeah, no, that wasn't the one that is annoying. Is there anything else? Something about the percentage. Okay, it's not that. I'll tell you what it is. If you have a corporate PowerPoint font or a company PowerPoint font with this banner, and you paste an image over it, I'm sorry, it just looks sloppy and lazy. And if you're going to a customer with a slide deck like this, or if you come to me with a slide deck like this, I think, well, you're not actually putting much effort into how you're communicating information, right? It takes next to 0 clicks to get rid of this information. My job as a communicator is to make you see the information I want to see and be unencumbered by any other noise. So doing this is just, it sends shivers down my spine. This is like, oh yeah, you showed that little bit about thought, little bit of extra thought about how you're communicating to me. Now, if you do this in PowerPoint, then you just click hide. You make me happy this way. You make me sad and a little bit angry this way, right? So just make the data have all the focus of every slide. And finally, if you've got a complex chart that you know is not good enough for a presentation and you don't have time to improve it, then just do this. Whichever region you are in next year, you're in France, you're in the UK, and you're in Sweden, and you're in Hungary, you all have a percent growth target that is higher than 30%. Because doing this, you're all looking at me, possibly for the first time in the meeting, right? And I have the confidence and the data to back that up, and I can share that in a subsequent email. But if you know your slide and chart doesn't actually communicate what you wanted it to, then don't show it. Be brave. So there we go. We've got 3 minutes left. Do start adding questions to Slido. I'll just wrap up. You show data on screens, whether that's on a keynote stage, in a breakout session, or even in a meeting room just with your colleagues. What we did was look at each of these 3 types. If you're showing complex dashboards or data applications, your audience have no idea what they're looking at. If there's 100 pieces of information on that screen, you need to draw attention to what they need to look at the moment you tell them about it, to bring them along, to help them understand what is a small screen designed application. Secondly, we are trying to use data to drive change. Great, that's kind of the point. So if you put analytical charts that you've built and then not thought about how they explain the point you're making in a time that's relevant to the amount of time it's on the screen, then you're letting yourself down. Think about how that data should communicate the message you want to convey. And finally, many of you show your products to customers. Don't show it as if you're the user using the product day to day. Make sure you think about how to show that product in such a way that you're actually selling it and showing it to people. This was my motivation. I sat through many years of really bad meetings and saw lots of highlights, learned lots of great tricks from many amazing people along the way. This is the last mile, right? You've got complex data applications in your offices, in your companies. You might be selling things like that. But at some point, you've got to take the insight and take the data analysis you've done from the data you've collected, from the data you've stored, you've sourced from many different incredible sources, and you've actually got to convey an opinion or an argument with that data. When you do this and build a chart like this, you are letting yourself down. So I hope over the last 40 minutes, you've got a few tips on how to maybe do that a little bit better. If you saw Brent's talk yesterday, he had some great ideas as well. Go read my book, which is about dashboards, or Cole Nussbaumer's Storytelling with Data. There's loads of great books to read about this. I will be at the Prezi stage after this if you have more questions. But otherwise, thank you very much. I hope that was fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is for you.
That is for me. Oh, a
Put
present.
that there. Yeah, it's a
thank you.
little present. And we can start with some questions. First question is, how do you like pie charts?
Oh my God. 19 people upvoted that one. Pie charts. How long do we have? Right. Who likes pie charts? Right, who doesn't like pie charts? Right, whoa, okay. I don't have a problem with pie charts. A pie chart with 1 or 2 segments, not too bad. My own journey through data visualization represents every new graduate leaving school, right? We don't teach this stuff at school properly. So every year, hundreds of thousands of students leave university, and they go, wow, data visualization, I'm going to make a pie chart with 25 segments on it. And then they start reading about data visualization and realize, oh, pie charts are shit. God, right, I'm going to slam pie charts. Nobody used pie charts. And then after about 8 years, they realize, well, you know, it kind of depends. Sometimes you can use a pie chart. And then about a year after that, you start moaning, it's like, why are we still arguing about pie charts? So the problem is, pie charts are to be used with care and attention, and until our governments create a curriculum where we actually educate children about data literacy, we're going to have that question in every single presentation for the future. That's what I think about pie charts. A great question.
And a nice answer. How to present data to stakeholders who are not at all familiar with the data set. In general, they are lost very early in the presentation.
Great question. I think I would take you back to Hans Rosling. What he did there was bring forward a data set about fertility, population, continent, and life expectancy. There was at least 5 different data points in that data set, and there was about 180 fields on 180 dots on the chart. He introduced each data point individually. He started with what one data point represents. This data point is a country. The size represents the population. And then you saw him, he physically went, this x-axis represents life expectancy, and this one represents fertility, right? So if you are losing people in a presentation, you are possibly not explaining the data set in a step-by-step approach. If you can't do a presentation where you can do it in a step-by-step approach, then you probably need a different format to deliver that knowledge.
And what advice would you give to analysts who develop the analyses and presentations but are not the ones presenting them?
That's a really good question. I would think you have to put a lot of effort into, anytime I've picked up somebody else's presentation, it's really hard because I am not in the brain that they created. We at Tableau, we've worked really hard to create some data-driven presentations that anyone can pick up and present. And it is a huge amount of work because unfortunately what you have to do is write a script which says every single thing you need them to say. Right? You can't rely on them to look at your pie chart with one highlighted segment and know that that means 80% of leads have come from the wrong source. It has to be spelled out. And what we found is that the amount of work that goes into that script is really hard, right? So with a written script, if it's all there, really down to fine detail, then at least they can understand your intent and maybe deviate to make themselves feel comfortable. The other thing is also record a video of yourself delivering that presentation. Because without hearing how I'm going to talk about the data, they won't know how I want them to talk about the data. So a video at a minimum, and the hard work is create a script that anybody can pick up. It's hard work, I'm afraid.
What advice do you have when you have a lot of slides with a lot of data?
Question why you have a lot of slides with a lot of data. I'd probably remove them. Yeah, that feels like a throwaway answer, but as an audience, you have an attention span, right? And if I show you a chart and a chart and a chart and a chart, and if the charts aren't changing, then I'm going to lose you fairly quickly. So think, do you really need all those things in the presentation? Can you summarize that and say, and here's a handout with details? Possibly you can't. Another thing you can do, if you are going to show loads and loads of slides of data, which I wouldn't recommend you do, create a cognitive break every so often. I mean, 20 minutes is kind of the longest somebody can concentrate for. So you noticed in this presentation, there was a video after about 15 minutes. Then I made you all raise your hands after about another 20 minutes. They're just little breaks in the presentation to mean you don't have to listen to my voice for the full 45 minutes. But question how many slides you need.
All right. What is your opinion on programmatic visualizations, e.g. ggplot, versus WYSIWYG editors.
WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, editors. So
Amazing.
I'm from Tableau. My answer is going to be slightly biased because that's a WYSIWYG drag and drop editor. With ggplot, with code, when you code something, you have ultimate power and flexibility. That's great. That's absolutely amazing. With drag and drop tools like Tableau or Click or Power BI, you have less control, but you will be a whole lot more productive more quickly. With ggplot, you have to be a data scientist or a coder. That's great, but guess what? Most of the people outside of this building are not coders. So how are we serving them when they have to write code? With Tableau, you sacrifice, or with the drag and drop tools, you sacrifice ultimate control, but you create more flexibility and you open these tools up to more people. I'd say it's the same as comparing an SLR camera and a home developing studio with Instagram, right? We can argue which is better, but they've both been incredible revolutions for the world and who can access photography tools. Good question. Oh, I like these.
How do you convince more junior people on your team that communication is a key part of the job?
Get them to watch my presentation. Lead by example. Tell them that communication is a key part of the job. God, how do I... Well, it's about education. If you really wanted to do it, you could put them on training courses, right? Put them on speaker training courses. Put them on, open the doors to the thing that talk about the importance of this last mile of data, right? Storytelling with data. Brent's got a new book coming out. There's loads of places they can go. We have things called Makeover Monday and Iron Visit Tableau, which encourages people to think in a communicative way. You could even make it part of their objectives, right? Go, if you don't think this is important, well, we're going to review how well you communicate your data at the end of the year in your annual review. Really drive change. This is hard work. Data science, data analysis, the technology is barely the first step on a journey of data communication and literacy.
How would you handle the situation when people on your presentation go deeply into how your data has been collected, questioning credibility, searching for errors?
First of all, you need to be confident in your data, right? So you've got to be ready to bat those things away. I think you've got to be ready to acknowledge when the data is uncertain. I mean, it's very, very rare any of us have true certainty in our data. Look at a sales target for next year. I mean, that's a projection, right? I can't really tell you if we've got a 30% growth rate in the UK, but I can tell you it's a projection. So be prepared for that. Have the humility to recognize that people are probably not trying to diminish you as an individual. They're trying to challenge what you're showing. Also, be really honest that data visualization is a way to convey an opinion or an argument, right? The data itself might be a truth, but the way you aggregate it and display it is opinionated, right? So own that and say, yeah, you may disagree. You've got the data set. Go and build me the data visualization that proves me wrong. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Yeah, that's a good one.
Have you seen any outstanding presentation in the conference yet?
Yeah, I saw two great. I think Brent's talk yesterday. Who saw the data storytelling talk yesterday? I thought that was excellent. I think Brent's got a really, really interesting model on taking data and making stories out of it. I've not seen it expressed that way before, so I thought that was really good. Did anyone see Josh Smith's opening keynote in the Amuse tent yesterday? Not many people. That was really good. That was about using AI as a design material. I mean, the content was great, but his slide design was, exceptional. Just really good, thoughtful slides. Did you think that? Whoever saw it? Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah, so they were the two highlights.
I'm happy you all are committed to this stage, by the way.
Yeah.
Solidarity. Solidarity.
But I was obviously a splitter. I went to Amuse yesterday. Oh, sorry.
We're watching you. Many references to PowerPoint. Have you discovered Prezi?
Yes, I have not used Prezi for several years. I'll be honest. Two things. First of all, I found people found it too exciting to make some spinning, nauseating, dizzying experience. Prezi can be done extremely well, so avoid spinning things around. I've been using PowerPoint for 20 years. I'm 47, right? It's harder when you're 47 to learn new tools. But I do know there's some integration with Infogram, and there's some other video recording tools coming up, which actually slightly persuade me to have another look.
It's great news, hopefully, in the future.
And thank you to Prezi for sponsoring this incredible conference, because this is my second time here, and I love it. It's a great event. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So how can you make sure that chart fits on a big screen? How can you make sure that a chart fits on a big screen when you can't test it before?
Yeah, so you speak, you find the organizer of where you're speaking, say, what's the screen resolution of the projector? Hopefully they'll tell you it's 16:9 or whatever the size is, and then you build your slides to fit that. So do some homework and work it out. I think we've got 3 minutes left, if anybody's wondering when we're going to stop. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, probably 3 minutes.
Because I could do this all day. I love these questions.
Me too,
But,
me
yeah.
too. What would you do if in a 400-plus people organization, only you cared about sloppy decks, but neither the presenter nor the audience?
I would... Was that anonymous?
It was anonymous.
Right. I would lead by example. I would do presentations like this. I would also make the point that if you take these decks to customers, ask customers what they think when they see these decks. This talk was inspired by three things. First of all, the charts that I see in meetings, but also because we have a Tableau on Tableau presentation we take to customers, and it's got a bunch of dashboards and things we use in Tableau, and it's awful. It's awful, and it doesn't have a script. And I'm sitting there going, we're in a market where we've got competitors like Power BI who make beautiful-looking dashboards. They look amazing, right? And you sit and go, you're literally turning sales away from us because you're making our product look bad. And that made people wake up. So try and quantify it on a bottom line thing.
Cool. We have time for maybe 2 more questions.
2 more.
So from Anna, she's wondering, I still think that data visualization is like learning a language. Some have the talent and others don't. It's still more intuitive than knowledgeable. What is your response?
That's right. So is learning data viz like a language? I 100% agree. In order to speak, I need to understand letters, then words, then sentence structure, then paragraphs, and then storytelling, right? And as a baby, we go through that process of iteration as we learn the skill of language. In the same reason, to make a chart, you need to understand what the marks mean, what are the actual atoms, so like bars and lines and dots. What do they mean? Then how do you assemble those into sentences, which could be the individual charts, right? When you do stack bars on top of each other or not. Then once you've got that language structure, you can then start to construct paragraphs and stories and communication. So 100% agree with that. Some have the talent and others don't. I would take some task to that. I mean, some people are talented multilinguists, but everybody in this room can talk. And if you give tools which help you get to the right place really quickly, then you can kind of get them to use the language skills in an intuitive way. It's still more intuitive than knowledgeable. Yes, a lot of this is intuition. If any of you ask me, I have this data set, how should I show this data? I have no idea, because the answer is it depends on what you are trying to achieve, to which audience, and how much time they have to look at it. So yeah, that intuition is something you learn over time. I would recommend learn the basics, analyze data, and then iterate and learn over time.
Maybe one quick one. We have 5 seconds. So who is your favorite presenter apart from Hans Gosling?
Hans Rosling. Who is my favorite presenter apart from Hans Rosling? Who have I seen? Oh, Gary Kasparov did an amazing keynote for us at Tableau Conference a couple of years ago. Chess Grandmaster. I mean, what's not to love about a chess Grandmaster? That's amazing. But he's written a really good book about called it's about AI and chess and what artificial intelligence might do for humanity, which is a really fascinating book, and he relates it all to chess. I was transfixed because I'm a chess nerd. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Great questions.